We continue to read the divorce case of Mr. and Mrs. Hall. The Claimants case. This is Mrs. Hall's case being put forward before the court. On the 24th of November 2018, the claimant, a cosmetologist, got married to Mr. Hall. So Mrs. Hall is a cosmetologist. She got married to Mr. Hall, an accountant. And they lived together at apartment 11D 8 Ocean Boulevard, Kingston, from the date of the marriage until the 1st of April 2019. Hold on there. The 24th of November 2018. November. Well, that's 6 days left for December, so let's start counting on the 1st of December. December 2018. Alright. January 2019, February, March. 4 months and 6 days. This is an interesting case. Let's continue. Why? I'm sure we got a lot to learn from this case. We continue here. Continue. The claimant, Mrs. Hall, said that she and Mr. Hall ceased to cohabit due to irreconcilable differences between them, which stemmed from frequent arguments about their finances and the relevant child. She also said they never went to counseling because it would prove to be futile. The relevant child was one from Mrs. Hall's first marriage, born on the 25th of November 2009. And she also resided with them for the same period. Well, no. So she's applying for all of those things after 4 months of marriage. The claimant, Mrs. Hall, asserts that Mr. Hall maintained both herself and her child during their cohabitation. But since she left the matrimonial home, he has not, and neither had he communicated with the child. That's with another man's child. She said her income had reduced to $6,000 to $7,000 per week following an accident in August 2014. But before that, she earned about $20,000 per week gross. That means before tax. She provided a list of monthly expenses for herself and her daughter, totaling about $179,000. Whoa. My. Her defense was that she owned an apartment at 17 Roswell Terrace, but it was jointly owned with the child's biological father, her ex-husband. The property was rented for $65,000 monthly at the time that the parties lived together, and she gave the defendant $30,000 each month, and the balance was used to pay the mortgage for Roswell. She has a maintenance order against the biological father for $34,500 monthly, but he is in arrears and pays only $20,000 monthly. So she has a child with another man, getting $20,000 monthly. Got married to Mr. Hall for 4 months. Applied for half of the house. Applied for maintenance for herself and maintenance for the child from Mr. Hall. She alleged that Mr. Hall was earning over $800,000 per month plus benefits, and that he had an accountancy firm. That, however, she had to be receiving financial support from her mother, who is no longer working. Other family members also assist from time to time. Interesting. Let's see Mr. Hall's case now. There was no issue joined between the parties as to how long they lived in the premises at apartment 11D, 8 Ocean Boulevard, Kingston. Mr. Hall, however, gave evidence that his mother formed a part of his household but left in February 2019, and he only provided general groceries for the house. Outside of that, the snacks for the relevant child and anything outside of general groceries were provided by the claimant, Mrs. Hall. He said that the claimant, Mrs. Hall, also paid all educational expenses for the child and that he only paid about 8 for about 8 extra lessons. The defendant, Mr. Hall, stated that he doesn't know whether the accident reduced the claimant's ability to work, as she worked by appointment, and he had never heard her complain about feeling unwell. He also stated that his sole source of income is from the Jamaican money market brokers, where he would receive a variable pay, which is a bonus based on performance. However, given the financial climate, there was no possibility of receiving variable pay. His evidence, well, that would have been the financial climate during the pandemic there, COVID, which was very bad. Right. And that was during 2020, in the midst of it. However, read that already. His evidence is that the property at Lot 28, Whitewater Meadows, in the parish of St. Catherine, is owned by him and his mother, and is not income generating at this point, as his mother had to move there because of issues with the claimant. His issues with Mrs. Hall. So Mrs. Hall caused his mother to move away, probably due to distress caused by Mrs. Hall. That's Mr. Hall alleging this here. He claims that she had since returned to live with him. That's his mother, since returned to live with him, I guess after Mrs. Hall moved out of the apartment. But he has not secured a tenant as some structural issues had surfaced. His testimony is that he used a savings loan from his employer to purchase his motor vehicle, and he is still servicing the loan. However, unlike Mrs. Hall, he gave evidence that they separated in February 2019 and not when she left in April 2019. Hold on. November, December, January. So it's really less than 4 months then of marriage. I mean, they were separated before she left. Separated after 3 months, then she left after 4 months. He remembered that that was when he had asked his mother to relocate, and he was very upset about it and began sleeping in the room that his mother had occupied. He said that the tenant at the Claimants' apartment, Mrs. Hall's apartment, was to pay $95,000 per month, and $65,000 was to go towards Mrs. Hall's mortgage. The balance was to be reimbursed to him for the money he spent on her apartment. Therefore, in contrast to what Mrs. Hall said, the $30,000 was a refund and not towards the home expenses. The tenant, he explained, stayed about 3 months, and he was reimbursed $90,000 in total, $30,000 each month. So it seems Mr. Hall spent money on Mrs. Hall's property that was rented and was paid back $30,000 each month. He concluded that he purchased the family home before he married Mrs. Hall, and that their marriage was for a short duration. And on that basis, he asked the court to vary the equal share rule, and for Mrs. Hall and for the claimant, Mrs. Hall, not to be awarded any interest in the family home. We'll next look at the summary of submissions on behalf of the claimant, Mrs. Hall.